I'd like to share a little about certain techniques for monitoring student progress, as well as certain intrusive practices I apply to my online English 100 class. Ever since attending the CUE Equity Minded Teaching Institute in the summer of 2018, I've been really intentional about developing methods for monitoring student engagement with the course, especially in collaborative or community-oriented spaces. I've also really invested in high-touch interventions, particularly within the first 3 weeks. CUE really emphasizes the value of the first 3 weeks as setting the culture for a course. And focusing on those first 3 weeks, I've found far more opportunities to intervene than I had realized before. The first set of tools I explored for monitoring student engagement really live inside of Canvas. There's the New Analytics button, which you can find on the home page, which gives you a sort of a bird's eye view of the course, from frequency of interaction within the course to sorting by students, to see how many pages they've viewed, what their grade is, etc. The other tools that are available to tracking and documenting information about students lives inside the gradebook. There is a notes column that you can toggle on by clicking through the view menu. This notes column sort of slides with you as you navigate the gradebook, and you can place in that notes column next to a student's name information about that student that you feel is pertinent. You can also, in the assignments, using the pill menu, toggle on a message feature, which will message all students according to a certain criteria that you set. So for example, you can message students who have not yet submitted an assignment, or who have submitted an assignment late, or who do not meet a certain score threshold that you identify. These tools are nice in the convenience they offer us, because they live all in one place, and they really do have this sort of quick access in the moment when we feel we want to record or respond to a student based on their engagement with the course. But I find that they're very general. The New Analytics view and the limited sort of documentation we have over notes really give a broad view, even though you can sort of track individual students. And when you message students through the grades book, it's a broadcast, right? And students know when they've gotten a message that other students received. So it's not as personalized or as individualized. So another method I've explored to compensate for those tools is to simply work inside of a spreadsheet that I have documented according to specific affective issues, or specific moments within the semester, or specific assignments that I feel are really important for me to track. So you can see here an example of a spreadsheet I've created where I have a column for very early in the semester based on an icebreaker activity. I'm documenting notes that I've color-coded according to what I'm hearing a student communicate. Perhaps a student sounds a little worried, or perhaps a student is describing a schedule that's incredibly busy, or possibly a student is just super confident, right? And so these affective issues that the student is bringing to the class, I'm tracking it to give myself a sense of who each of the students are, based on what they're divulging, and this gives me a sense of how I might reach out later in the semester. My spreadsheet also gives me a space to track their discussion responses, so their participation throughout the semester, and it's very easy to see by mid-semester who's responding and participating a lot and who isn't. So it's a nice quick view of how I might reach out to a student. And then also, and I'll speak about this more when I get to my intrusive practices, but this gives me a space to track whose work I have featured and when I've featured it, and when I've reached out to a student and met with a student, or had a one-on-one conversation with a student. So this tracking of my own contact with a student, I find is an even more kind of granular view of the course and student engagement and how things are going. This is so I think all of that is a pro. The con to this approach is it's very time heavy up front. There's a lot of trial and error for building a spreadsheet like this, and it doesn't have the nice sort of convenience of living inside of Canvas. And so I found myself printing this out at times, typing in it at times. There is that sort of downside to it. The final technique I'll share about monitoring progress and or monitoring engagement is really more of an informal, off-the-cuff data collection. You can see an image here during week 3 where I just suddenly realized I needed to pay attention to who was actively engaging in a Zoom session, and I hadn't set anything up to capture this data, so I just turned my roster over and started scribbling. I think what's really nice about this is for certain situations like small group work, this can be very helpful for thinking about how to compose groups going forward, how to position students based on their interactivity, where they might emerge as leaders or they might find more comfortable spaces for interacting. The downside for this kind of data collection, of course, is that it's sort of decontextualized, and it has the sort of the potential to be discontinued because it is sort of reactionary. But I've found that really the trial and error I spoke of earlier, and really honing in my own data collection spreadsheet, that this kind of off-the-cuff monitoring has led to the creation of new columns or new sort of methods for keeping track of students and their engagement with the course. So as you think about your own systems for monitoring progress, a couple of things I think are important to keep in mind are what will allow you to observe and document affective elements, elements that Canvas can't observe because there's nothing built in to capture it. How might you apply a race-conscious or gender-conscious lens, or another lens of identifying intersectional identities that will help you to be more specific and equitable and strategic in how you intervene for students? And what is that trade-off between sort of the general view of the class community and the groups that are forming versus that individual student who's navigating those spaces? And how might you collect sort of the broad, the macro and the micro to intervene for the sake of the individual as well as the betterment of the community?